Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. I see a lot of people are entering. Thanks for joining the webinar. I'll give it a couple minutes here before we really get kicked off and going. But thank you all for joining today. We're excited to talk a little bit about the tournaments, what we have in store for 2025, all the different ways that you can participate with us, and all the different areas you can join. And so we have myself and Marissa from Anatomage here today. Marissa will be answering a bunch of questions as long as they're coming through on the chat. Please feel free to use the chat as you want to. We'll be trying to answer questions throughout. We will also have a Q&A session at the very end of the webinar. So I'll answer as many questions as I can live. But yeah, that will be in about 30, 40 minutes from now. Welcome, welcome. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think we've gotten everyone that's in the waiting room in. So perfect. Well, so thank you everyone for joining. I really want to say that up front. We're excited. We're excited to launch the tournament season. And so I don't know how many of you have done tournaments with us previously, but excited that you're joining us at least here to learn about it. And then we'll be excited to share more in the near future. So I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully everyone sees it just fine. I think it's working. Perfect. Okay, excellent. Welcome, everyone. So for those that don't know Anatomage or myself, my name's Jake Lehman. I've been with Anatomage now for 10 years. And so a large part of what I do is I work on something called Anatomage tournaments. These are our anatomy competitions that use the Anatomage tables to pit students against each other in anatomy competitions to answer as many questions as possible. And so it's a really fun event. We like putting these on. We try to put on as many as we can every year. And so a lot of the events that we do put on are in collaboration and partnership with HOSA. So we work to do a lot of these events at different states. And so I'll show you which states we're going to be doing these at as well and try to kick things off. So I'll start off with just a little bit of background for what is an Anatomage tournament. An Anatomage tournament is a team-based competition that focuses on knowledge of anatomical structures. So essentially, if you've never used one of our tables, it's a large virtual dissection table. And so on it, there's 4 different types of cadavers. And in there, you can go through, you can dissect. And so what's great about it is that you can also use it for testing. And so in these kind of tests, you have the cadavers and you're trying to answer all these different types of anatomy questions on them. These tournaments are really designed with the goal of supporting teamwork and supporting anatomy and physiology learning. We're really trying to promote healthcare education, and so that's a large part of why we do these tournaments in so many different areas. It just helps support and encourage those to get excited about anatomy, which is traditionally not a necessarily exciting subject. But we think it's pretty cool. And we host these tournaments for a lot of different groups. So at HOSA, at a lot of the different states, we have different divisions that you can actually participate in these tournaments. So we have them for high school students, middle school students, and collegiate students. And occasionally we have an advisor tournament, depending on if we can fit that into the schedule as well. Generally speaking, we do allow for multiple teams from a single school to participate in these events. So how the teams work is they are made up of groups of 3 to 4 students. And so their goal is to work together, as I kind of said, in sort of a time-based, point-based quiz. Our plan, we have over 50 tournaments scheduled for 2025, and they'll be held all over the US. We have some that are open that we call regionals. We have others that we partner with for HOSA, the SLCs and the ILC. And so we try to have them in as many ways as that we can. For all the tournaments, they progress in sort of a singular way, is that there's a preliminary round, and then if students score high enough, they advance to either a top 16, top 8, or the top four, hopefully getting all the way to the finals. And so at the end of this competition, there is some, head-to-head component to it where eventually there is going to be someone named an anatomy champion at the very end. So it's a bracket style tournament at the end of the day. This is a quick video that I wanted to showcase of what it looks like to, look at one of these tournaments. I don't think audio will play on this, and I'll just mute it either way and I'll just talk over it. But we hold these kinds of competitions where essentially you can see now what it kind of looks like to work on one of these tables. It's very interactive. You rotate a structure around, you're trying to identify where a particular piece of anatomy is. And you can kind of see here, this is what the bracket style portion of the event looks like. At a lot of our tournaments, we do have a sort of staged final where we try to have the finals in front of an audience. So there can be participants or an audience that views what's happening at the very end of the event in that top four and finals portion of it. And so you can see what these students are doing. They're rotating around trying to identify where a particular structure is, and then they're getting points for everything they're getting correct and negative points for if they're getting it wrong. And so this is sort of a video we put out a few years ago of a competition we did in Southern California, where this is just what the finals match kind of looks like. And so unfortunately, I don't have a live table here for you today to show this kind of demonstration on, but this hopefully gives you an idea of what, going through one of these events might kind of look like in person. They are very fun, they're very engaging, they're very high energy, and so we like to have a lot of fun at them as well. Hit pause here. There we go. Okay, so I want to launch this poll just because I'm curious. There's about 109 people here. And of those in attendance, I'm curious of, who's actually seen or participated in one of our tournaments before. Generally speaking, I think most of our events, we have about 40% returning and then 60% new. And so as you can kind of see, oh, wow, I'll share these poll results here in about 20 more seconds. But we have about a 15%, 15 to 85. So a handful of returning folks and then a lot of new that have not participated in tournaments with us before. And that's great. That's exciting. So that means that, this will be a new event for a lot of folks and hopefully you're able to join us at one of the tournaments we're planning to host this year. So give it one more second, then I'll end. Thank you to everyone who just submitted. I do appreciate it. And I'll share results so y'all can see. But yeah, I think it's really cool that, we get to put these on and every year it's a new, group of students that get to experience what these kind of competitions are like. And so, we're excited to talk about, having y'all come back this year as well. All right, I'll stop sharing this. Okay. So I wanted to give you a quick overview of what our tournament kind of season looks like. So in 2024, we had 43 different tournaments across the US. 40 of them were in person, 2 were virtual, and then we had the one national tournament that we put on at the end of May. We had just over 2,000 teams from all 50 states participate, and we had over 7,000 students in total compete in the competition throughout the year. So it was very exciting for us in 2024, and we're planning for an even bigger year this year in 2025. Now, a few things I always like to call out is that we get lots of positive feedback about the event in general from both instructors, students. I think a lot of folks find the event pretty engaging and exciting to be a part of. And our team really does try to make an effort for every single team that comes through and participates. We want to make the experience memorable, regardless of if you advance to the different stages of the tournament or not. So we try to educate almost every team that comes through about a little bit about our company, about the table itself, about the history of the cadaver that they're going to be using. Yeah, and so a number of different ways that folks can talk about it. I also have here some of the student testimonials from folks that have participated and students that have participated over the years. And this is just a small sample. Generally speaking, we send out a survey after every event so we can hear the positives and minuses of the event. But generally, it's overwhelmingly positive, and I think a lot of students have fun being able to study and use anatomy in this kind of way. All right, so I wanted to quickly showcase here a few things. So where are we hosting SLC tournaments this year? So these are all the states that we're going to be at the HOSA SLC for in 2025. And so I think this is just about 33 different states that we're planning to be present at and have an active tournament at this year. And so we're really excited to be able to put these events on, and at all of them, we'll at least have a couple tables, and yeah, we have prelims opening up. And so if you haven't seen the registration link potentially pop up yet for your state, that's okay. They're still going to be coming out, and a lot of them are getting put out in the next couple of weeks. So if you haven't been able to register, just make sure you register before you go to the SLC to guarantee that you do save a spot at the event. Sometimes some of the states we do fill up on tournament slots, so just keep that in mind, is that if you do want to participate, make sure you sign up as early as possible with your team. It just helps guarantee that you will have a spot when the event comes around. But yeah, we're really excited. So we're going to be at all of these different events, and a lot of our team will be traveling across to, a number of these different ones to put on these events for you. All right, so quick mention of what is going to be included for prizes. So we have prizes that we do for first through fourth place at every single tournament that we do. So we do Amazon gift cards for each student of that first through fourth place team. We do medals, and then we also do something where we hand out a small certificate for qualifying for our national Anatomage tournament. And so essentially this is a tournament that we hold it is separate from HOSA, but it is still, a big event for us. And so we're going to be putting it on this year at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas on Friday and Saturday, May 30th and 31st. So this year's event will be a 2-day event. We had 60 teams at this last year's event. We worked with the University of Nevada Medical School to put on a number of the different workshops that we had at the event. And then this year won't really be that much different. We're going to be putting on a ton of great workshops. We have a lot of stuff planned for it. And then ultimately, at the end of the event, we live stream the finals and the top 8 on stage. And so that will be on Saturday this year around the middle of the day. All right, so now I'm going to get into a bit of how does the tournament work, how you can participate in it, and just what to study for if you are planning to be participating in one of these this year. So I'm going to start with just the general structure of the actual tournaments themselves. The goal for every team that participates is to have the highest number of points total at the end of the round. And so the way you do that is by answering questions about, where an anatomy structure is. And so for every correct answer, it's 10 points. For every incorrect, it's -1. And for every skipped, it's 0. And the goal for all these teams is just to have the highest correct number total. So the idea is that you answer every anatomy question correctly in the time frame, and then it gives you the best option total or option possible to get to the next round. Every tournament that we do has at least a top 4, if not a top 8 or top 16. It just depends on the schedule of that particular tournament, and you can ask us and check with us ahead of time to see how many teams will be advancing from that preliminary round into the next rounds. And then we go over these same rules when we meet with everyone in person as well. That if there is a tie, it just comes down to how fast you do your round in. All right. So a quick breakdown of what we do in each of these tournament rounds. So every tournament block that we do, it's a 20-minute time slot. So in that, we go through a little bit of background about the table. We talk about the history of the cadaver. And then we also go through some practice tests and some introduction on how to work with the virtual cadaver. At the end of that 20 minutes, you do the 5-minute test and answer 25 anatomy identification and long form questions on it. If you do make it to the top 8, top 4, and finals, the timing and the question totals change a little bit just to make it a little bit more difficult in those later rounds. I want to talk a little bit about the anatomy content in here as well. So if you've participated with us before, you probably will have seen that we've used a male cadaver for predominantly all of our testing. This year, we're going to be mixing it up. So some of the events, we're going to be using the male cadaver. Some of the events, we're going to be using the female cadaver that we have. And so there, you might not necessarily know till when you get there that you'll have one or the other. Generally speaking, for all of the tests, we pull from every potential system in the body. So that includes skeletal, muscular, digestive, urinary, respiratory, cardiovascular, and nervous. And then within each of these, there's a little bit of extra stuff to study. So within the skeletal system, we do ask questions about bony landmarks, and I'll show some examples of that in a little bit. We also do ask questions about ligaments on the cadaver in the skeletal system. In the muscular, we do have recently added origin and insertion. Generally speaking, though, these are only added into the later rounds of the tournament and won't be used in the preliminaries. So you won't see these pop up there, but potentially maybe in the top 4 or finals. Cardiovascular, we do have the heart, and we do ask about that one throughout. And then the nervous system, we ask about the brain and the components in the brain, and then spinal cord nerves. And so I'll show a couple examples of different parts of these as well, just so you can get an idea of what it looks like to get asked about all these different types of questions in the table. Okay, so this year is a little bit of a new type of testing that we're doing this year as well. So traditionally, all of our questions have been asked in sort of, where is the structure on the cadaver format? So you might be asked where the deltoid is, and so then you have to select the muscle on the shoulder to submit that answer. We have a few new question types that will be introduced. And so I have examples for these all as well that I'll walk with y'all through. We're going to be asking about general function of structures. So, I have one in our test that will come up that says, what is the name of the organ that stores urine in the body? And so the bladder would be the answer. And so that's where you have to select. General anatomy knowledge and structural relationships. I'll go through a couple of examples of this in a sec. Common names of the anatomical structures, muscle origin, insertion, and innervation as well. And then blood flow and supply. So we have a study guide this year. Anyone that is wanting it, our new website for the tournaments will go live middle of next week. And so if you want to go check it out then, you can go on to anatomage.com to find the new tournament website. Or you can always email tournaments@anatomage.com as well for a list of all of these different questions on the study guide. And so this is a couple examples of each that I want to just highlight as well. So for anatomy identification, this is really just an understanding of the different locations of structures in the body and stuff like, the right ventricle, left cephalic vein, all these different areas of the different systems that I mentioned before. The general function of structures. So this might be how structures work together or the general function of what they do in relation to, to support different parts of the body. And so this is a few different examples that I think are helpful to give you an idea of what you need to understand about anatomy to be able to answer them correctly. And so this is asking essentially for understanding of what a particular component of the body does. And we don't have a ton of these longer form questions in there, but we do ask them throughout the test. The relationships between structures is an important one. So this is something where we might ask for a structure that separates two different structures, or something that is medial or more lateral in the body. So incorporating both an anatomical terminology as well as anatomy position on the body. Common names of structures. And so this one is a little bit more, either you've heard this name before or you haven't, something like what is the windpipe or where is the collarbone. Both of these are, common names for structures of, the trachea and the clavicle, but, common names that are helpful to understand. Another area is muscle origin, insertion, and innervation. So origin insertion, these are identified by points on the skeletal system of where a particular muscle inserts or the origin of that muscle is on the skeletal system. The innervation is directly related to the nerves going into muscles throughout the body. And so we won't ask a ton of questions like this, but we will ask some here and there as we get into the more later rounds of potential tournament. All right. And last, blood flow and supply. So maybe asking for a structure that drains into the heart or a structure that supplies blood to a region of the body. Either one of those could potentially be asked. And it kind of asks for some understanding of what the different systems do and, what kind of areas of the body they support. All right. So I'm going to be going in and going through a live version of some of this in just a second. But I wanted to highlight a few tips for the tournament as well. And so these are things we try to remind teams of before we start a round, but I think it's good to talk about them here as well. The first and foremost thing for every team I try to tell them is just be aware of the time you're spending on each question as you go throughout it. So in that first preliminary round that we do, it's 5 minutes and 25 questions. That really means you need to spend about 10 to 12 seconds per question to get through the whole test. Now, you also want to stagger how much time you're spending on the anatomy identification questions versus some of those longer ones that I just highlighted, where maybe you're only spending 8 to 10 questions for the anatomy identification, and then the longer ones you can spend 15 to 20 to, kind of let it soak in. The other thing that you can always do with this is, skipping, but I'll talk about that in a sec. Learning how to read rights and lefts on structures. This is probably the most common way that teams get questions wrong, is just by not looking at what's right and what's left on the body. Very often a team does know where a structure is, but they might not realize that they're looking at the wrong side of the body if they flipped it over. So this is a very vital part of, answering questions correctly, is just making sure you are looking at the right or left side. One other thing that I like to point out is that our table does try to help teams if there is different systems that are visible at once. So let's say you had venous and arterial tissues on the table. So let's say you have a visual of both the arterial system and the venous system, and it's asking you, can you identify this artery? On our table, the arterial system is generally identified as red. The venous is generally identified as blue. What that's used to signify is that the arterial is the red is the oxygenated blood, the blue is the deoxygenated blood. And so the table won't let you pick the wrong system if you have a question being asked of it. What that means is that, so if you were getting asked for, let's say, the inferior vena cava, in a venous system, it won't let you select a red structure that isn't a part of that system. So it does try to help you in those cases. Skipping questions. So skipping questions is the best way to save points throughout our testing. So you might have noticed earlier when I was talking about scoring, skipping a question is 0 points, but getting it wrong is -1. It's better to skip a question if you don't know it, and if you aren't 100% confident with it, than it is to answer it and get it incorrect. That 1 or 2 points that you get for getting it wrong, another team might have acknowledged that they're not going to get it correct, and they might have beat out another team to get into that last spot for the knockout rounds. It happens a lot. It happens more often than you would assume, where teams are only separated by a point or two that decides who makes it into the next round or not. All right, and so I wanted to go into some of the live portion of this, and so let me get out of here. Okay, so I have up Vicky, if those that are familiar with the table. This is one of the 4 cadavers that we have in our system. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to load up some questions and some examples so that you can see what some of those long form questions look like, how it plays on this cadaver. Also, I want you all to take a look at just, see how these different, systems work that you'd be using for the testing. Essentially, when you're actually using our cadavers, it is on a full life-size table. So instead of I'm right now using a mouse and keyboard to control this, you would actually be using your fingers. You could zoom, you could touch it, and it would rotate, or it would, kind of look at a different area. it is very interactive, and so it is a real body that we are using when we go through and work with these cadavers. And it's something that we like to point out. This is someone that donated their body to science specifically with the purpose of being used in educational settings like we use it in. They had their own pathologies, and so you could go and find those as you go throughout this cadaver. All right, but so I wanted to dive in a little bit to the testing side of what we do. And so you'll get a sense of what this looks like. So I think I already have this loaded. I'll change this to 5 just so I can slow this down. I have 10 questions here as an example that you can see. And so this will be good to, get a sense of what to study as we go through this. So it starts out with a few of the anatomy identification questions. And so I think we have 4 here to go through. But so this is a good example of what it looks like to, work with this. You have this cadaver here. It's asking for the biceps brachii, which, is this structure here. And so your job is to either skip it or confirm it. In this case, I know I have it selected, so I will hit confirm. Next up, we have the transverse colon. So how this one works is that you need to have a good understanding of what the GI tract is. Transverse colon, in this case, it comes across the body like you see here. So if I select this, that's how I know which one I'm looking for. And again, hit confirm once it's there. Frontal lobe. So when you get a nervous system question, you'll only see that system up live as you're actually going through it. And so it's asking for the right frontal lobe. And so, when you're looking at the cadaver like this, it can be a little confusing, but it is the right side of the cadaver. And so I always recommend turning the cadaver to make sure you are looking at the right component of it, so I know which lobe I'm actually hitting. Hit confirm there and move on from there. Now, this is a good example of what a bony landmark looks like on our system. So when you go through and look at our cadavers, bony landmarks normally aren't, colored if you were going to be looking at a real human body, but we've gone through and actually made sure that you can actually identify, all the bony landmarks, and they're highlighted by these, bright colors that you see here. In this case, I have the head of the femur, and I can touch that, and once it highlights, I can hit confirm. And you'll see I got that one correct as well. All right, so identify the bone that is commonly known as the collarbone. And so this was on that example sheet I showed up earlier today. But this is part of our study guide. This is what we would call a common name type of question that might potentially pop up on one of the different tests. So I can go through, I can hit that, hit confirm. And then another one, also known commonly as the windpipe. Can go in here, select that, hit confirm. Now, I think I actually also mentioned this one in the practice examples, but identify the organ that stores urine. So that would be the bladder down here. I can highlight that. Now, however, I do want to show how the skipping functionality works as we're using this. I'm just going to skip it. So you'll notice the points didn't change. I didn't get right or wrong. I just saved it for later. Anytime you skip using our table, the question will come back at the end of the test. So you can go through and identify it later. So very quickly, I wanted to show what a blood supply question looks like. And so this is the, they're asking for the vein that drains blood from the head and neck and upper limbs into the right atrium. These questions you can generally infer if you are familiar with general region terminology. So I could look around and say, all right, so I can see it's a venous system, so I know it's going to be deoxygenated, and it's going to be returning blood to the heart, right? So you can kind of follow along the line to try to figure out what this might be. But in this case, it's saying into the right atrium. So if you know what the chambers of the heart are, there's actually 2 veins that go into the right atrium, which is right here. And so it does say from the upper portion, so it's going to be this as the right answer. And so a number of these new questions that we're introducing can be inferred on the spot, even if you don't necessarily know the name of that structure. But you might know names of the surrounding structures, and that's a very helpful point for being able to answer them on the test. This is a good question for being able to understand, how is basically how do different structures relate to each other? And so this one's asking what bone is lateral the lateral bone of the right arm? Lateral means away from the center. And so we asked this question in the idea that it would be is, anatomical position. So if I hit confirm here, that would be the radius on the thumb where, your palm's facing upwards. So that would be the correct one. And so this was another one where it's sort of understanding relationships. There's one muscle that separates the upper and lower abdominal cavities, and that is the thoracic, the diaphragm here. And so you can select that. Now, if you all remember, I did skip a question earlier. I mentioned that it is the bladder. But yeah, at the end of every test, you could always see the questions you skipped, and you can see my timer is about to run out here, but I'll hit confirm, and you'll see I got 10 correct. Now, you can always take a look at the end of every test. We do have, an output of what you got right and wrong, and you can see how long you spent on each question. In this case, you probably wouldn't talk over it as long as I did here, or at least I would hope not in person, but you very well could. And so the real test, though, keep in mind, it's a bit quicker than that. So I gave myself, I think 5 minutes here. And it is 5 minutes and 25 questions, not 5 minutes and 10 like I did here. This is just a quick example of what some of the new question types are going to look like. All right, now I'm going to jump back to my slideshow here. All right, so I want to quickly just talk about what are some tools that you can use to study, what are things that we provide that you potentially access, things that are helpful for studying for these kinds of, for the competition. So first and foremost, we just recommend, using whatever you have access to. We've seen a lot of winners of these different events, and do not think at all that you need an Anatomage table and an Anatomage product. You absolutely don't need that to compete and to win these events. More often than not, schools don't have an Anatomage table. And so the teams that are winning more often than not don't have a table to work on. They just know their anatomy pretty well. And so understanding relationships, understanding where these different structures are, it's really vital to, just being able to compete well on this. And so, using textbooks, labs, worksheets, whatever you're doing already in your anatomy curriculum, that's a great way and a great starting point to be successful in these events. Using whatever resources you have on hand that you would normally go through, that's a very good way. The tournament questions that we ask generally mirror a little bit of where you're at in that year's A&P curriculum. So when we're doing testing in the fall, we primarily focus on skeletal and muscular. When we're doing testing in the spring, like we will for a lot of the HOSA SLC events, you're a bit further in your A&P curriculum where you probably will have had cardiovascular, maybe touching some nervous, maybe touching some GI. And so the questions kind of mirror, some of those things that you'd be seeing at that point in the year. If you do have a table, that's great. You can use these cadavers, you can study on them. It's a great resource to be able to practice the competition components. But I also like to point this one out. So one of the things that we do is we try to make a very even playing field for anyone that is competing in our competitions. And so we have something called Anatomage Lessons. This is we give a free trial to any instructor that wants to sign up for it. And essentially it gives you access to 2 of our cadavers. The 2 cadavers that we use in our testing are both on there, and you can use them on a computer. It's just a web-based software platform that you can basically use these digital bodies from anywhere. And so we have other things in there as well. There's chapters for A&P studying that you can go through with some activities and quizzes. But the real thing that's really helpful, and especially for our, testing in the competition, is you do have those 2 bodies, both the male and female that we use in the testing, would be available for students to reference and go through and poke through on their own. Basically, we only ask that the instructors set up the trial and then they can add students to it. Basically, we allow the trial to start 2 months before any competition. And so, if you are interested and, want to use this as a study tool, please reach out. You can reach out to us and we can put you in contact with the right person. Or you can always message lessonsinquiry@anatomage.com to start a trial. And so it's great. You can use this as the study tool for, before any tournament that you're, planning to be a part of, you can, get access to it through that. So let us know and we're happy to put you in touch there. And then we have a lot of different areas you can participate with us. So as you saw that list earlier, all the different HOSA state leadership conferences, the international leadership conference as well. And then we have a virtual qualifier. If we don't, for some reason, hit one of your states, if you are part of, HOSA and we're not going to your state, we try to go to as many as we can. We sometimes can't attend every single one, but we do have the option for a virtual qualifier. And so in middle of February, we are going to be doing, it's basically taking a version of that prelim test that I've been talking about, 25 questions, 5 minutes. And it's online. We run it through Zoom, so a team could still connect, participate, but it's a single round, and the goal of that round is essentially to score above a point total. And then that's another way students can qualify to go to the national Anatomage tournament we're doing at the end of the year. But yeah, so that's a rough overview of, all the things that we got planned, some of the new stuff that we have for testing, and yeah, different areas we're planning to be at. And so, yeah, my name's been Jake. I'm happy to answer questions. I see the chat's been going throughout me talking. I'm sure Marissa's been trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. I'm going to go through, and so any of the most recent chat messages, I'm just going to start to shout out. And I'll, try to answer as much as I can. And so the first question I can immediately address. If your state isn't on that list for 2025, how do we request this tournament in our state? And so there's a couple options. One is the virtual qualifier, as I kind of mentioned. The other is, we can send, a list of, regional tournaments we potentially are doing, or other areas. If you do want to have the tournament in your state, then we do need to talk to your state advisor potentially. And so, we are trying to grow the presence at a number of different states as much as we can. And then how do you register for the tournament? So that is a great question. A lot of state tournaments or a lot of states haven't opened up their registration yet, but they will be doing it within the next couple of weeks. A number of states do wait until the actual state HOSA SLC registration closes. And then they send out our flyer with our registration link the week or so or the day or so after, so that your schedule and you'll know when you'll be available to participate in our tournament. But if you want to email us, we can let you know if they've opened it up or not, and then we can always send it over if you do want to sign up. And let's see, I know I can see Marissa's responded to a number of them. And so I'll try to pick out a few. If you have new questions, I'll start answering some of these ones at the bottom. What do you recommend is the best way to study? So I would say use whatever tools you have on hand. If you have, a textbook, that's great. If you have worksheets, if you have labs, that's great. If you don't have any of those, lessons at Anatomage or lessons is probably the best tool for studying, simply because it just has the 2 cadavers that are being used on the test. And I would recommend that as a study tool. It's very comprehensive. It's a great way to, be able to look at these. And it's free. You can just start a trial. The instructor has to set it up, but besides that, it is free. Oh my goodness. Is there a cost for the tournaments? There isn't. We do not charge anything for the tournaments. However, I think there is some cost at certain states that do charge for it, but that's more associated with your registration to that state conference, not through us. We don't charge anything extra to participate in our tournaments. What system do you recommend studying the most? Unfortunately, it is kind of all of them. I wish I could give you a better answer. I'll go back up to the top where I have that list. We ask questions from everything. We ask a lot from skeletal. We ask a lot from muscular. We ask some from digestive, urinary, respiratory, cardiovascular, nervous. I wish I could tell you that, we don't pick certain systems, but generally speaking, we at least have a few questions from every single system. The best hint I can give you though for studying is we ask mostly primary structures, so big structures in those systems in the preliminary rounds. As you advance to further rounds, either the top 8, the top 4 finals, we ask for smaller structures. And so they're branching off the major ones at that point. So, we might ask for femurs in the first round in the skeletal system. In the top 8, we might be asking for the greater tubercle or a smaller bony landmark on it, and then so on and so forth. As it advances, it gets much more difficult. Oh, good question. On Anatomage lessons, there is more than just anatomy. For these competitions, we only ask about anatomy and physiology. We are not asking about biology, chemistry, physics. We aren't touching on any of those. Will we be able to access the recording of this meeting? I think so. I think Bobby's going to send it out. And I believe for anyone that registered, they'll be able to see it. But also for those that didn't register, I think it's going to get sent out as well. The study guide is available. It is on our website, but we can also email it to you. If you do email the tournaments@anatomage.com email at the very bottom, you can always go there. Are there any questions based off of cadavers' possible health conditions? No. So we don't do any for that. Not on this competition, at least. Does this count towards the HOSA Leadership Certificate Program? I don't believe it does. I'm not familiar with it, so I can't say confidently if it does or does not, but I don't think so. And currently, we do not have tournaments for bio and chem, but it's something we are looking to try to introduce in the future. Currently, it's only for anatomy, but that might change in future years. We have another product called Science Table, and that has a ton of biology, chemistry, and physics experiments, and we're looking to create a testing module for that. And thank you, Bobby, for announcing where he's going to post the webinar. So that is going to be visible. If anyone wants to see where that link is, it's at the very bottom. Bobby just posted it. All right, let's see. Are there any immediate questions that I can answer? If anyone wants to have a question answered, please put it at the bottom. I can guarantee that I will get to it. Let's see. I see one more just popped up. During the competition round, will some teams have male and others have female? No, it will be for the whole. For every tournament, we keep it the same test. We don't flip-flop back and forth. So if you are starting with the male cadaver, it's the male cadaver all the way through, or it is for that entire round, and everyone's on an even playing field for it. Does this competition happen in person at the SLC? Yes. So at that list of states that I kind of showed earlier, these are all the states we will be at in person. And so, hold on. If your state is on here, we will be there. We are planning to be there, and you can, participate in person at these states. If it's not on this list, go ahead and email us. We can let you know where the closest ones are that you could potentially participate in. Also, virtually is another option. So if a team goes first, they see the question, they won't have access to the internet, right? Correct. Basically, you only have 5 minutes to take the test. Once your score is in, that's the only score you're going to get. How does the preliminary round work? Is there only one? There is. You get practice tests before you take the preliminary round test, but you have to take that test at the end of your time slot, that 20-minute time slot. Can you watch other teams? Only after you've taken your test. So generally our team's pretty careful. If a team is testing, we ask, others to not watch, especially if they are planning to participate in the tournament later that day. We try to keep it as even and fair as possible. We do have some ethical guidelines, but also, we don't want folks just blatantly cheating on, the testing. Are reproductives on the test as well? Generally speaking, we don't put the reproductive systems on there. It's not on our list of structures. Urinary is on there, but urinary is different than reproductive. Uh, Generally speaking, since we live stream our finals for the national, we don't put any reproductive systems on there, and that's an intentional choice. So there wouldn't be any on the state levels either. Thank you, Marissa, for seeing how long the tournament is. How long is the whole tournament? So the prelim rounds we go through for, depending on some states, it's within a day from start to finish. For other states, we start on the first day and then we finish on the third day. It just depends on that particular event schedule. Some tournaments we get over 100 teams, and so it takes us a lot of time to get through all the prelim rounds. Others we only have 30 to 40, and then there's less. It just takes less time to get through it all. Rules and content are generally the same at ILC, yes. So this content list that you see here, this will be the same at either the SLC or the ILC. The only difference is the ILC, there is some teams who have competed with us, or a lot of teams that have competed with us already in the year. We do make the test a little bit harder at the ILC, just as a heads up. Would someone from Canada be able to register through a state? That is a great question. I do not know the answer to that. At the very least, you could register for a virtual qualifier. That is an option that I can answer right up front. But if you wanted to do an in-person state one, you might have to contact that particular state and see if you could register through there. We might not be able to answer that one directly. Are the cadavers in the same age group for all rounds? Yes. So the cadavers don't change. If we have two cadavers that we essentially use for our testing, the female is in her mid-20s, the male is early 30s. And so it's either one of those two cadavers that we use. I know we've answered a number. Oh. Yes, thank you, Marissa. Registration is now live for virtual qualifiers. If you do want to participate in those, you're more than welcome to. They are not associated with HOSA. It's more associated directly with just our own competitions. That is a great question. We won't need to clear away a lot of anatomy structures to get to the answer. That is correct. So if you notice when I did that live demonstration, every structure is visible from the time that it is being asked. So you will never need to do dissection. We haven't introduced that type of testing yet, but yeah, you will be able to essentially go in, and if you get asked about the skeletal system, every skeletal structure will be visible. Muscular, if it's a deeper structure, it will be visible if it's being asked. And then do you need to pick your time slot? So at the state events, yes, you will need to pick a time slot. And so our system essentially requires you to pick a specific time with us so that we know when you're going to be coming by for your time slot. No, so you do not need to do the virtual qualifier to participate in the SLC. The virtual qualifier is only if you are interested in participating at the national event that we do. It is not the ILC, it's not the SLC. It's a different event altogether. And then how can you quiz yourselves on the table? So if you do have a table and you are interested in trying to use it for quizzing, the best area for it that I recommend, there's a number of how-to guides on how to use the quizzing functionality on the table itself. But the first step would be just setting up some training with us. So we could either, set up time and we can put you in touch with the team that does training. There is videos on how to walk through using our quizzing system. There's also guides. And so an area that we use a lot is called anatomageshare.com. And so there's a lot of guides on there for being able to go through the steps of how you would set up a quiz and then use it to quiz yourself. And so you can use the quizzing system for flashcards, or you can use it like you saw me use it today, where you're getting points for every correct or incorrect. Yeah, we can send out information about our tournaments. And we'll send out at least a quick overview of, where our we can work with we can work to get a list of all our tournaments out there. It's currently on our website. We have a full list of every tournament that we're doing on there. So if you do want to see those, you're more than welcome. Visit anatomage.com and navigate to the tournament section. That's the best place to look. Are the long form questions also seen on the table? Nope, it is the same test. So the long form questions that you saw me go through today, those will all be at the same time. So uh, in that same time frame that I was talking about earlier, you will see both types of questions mixed together. They will be in randomized order. Ah, very good question. Are there levels of questions based on if you're in high school or if you're in college? Yes. So the college testing is harder than the high school. The high school is harder than the middle school. And so based on your level of, which division you're in, we have a different test and it's a completely different bracket. So we aren't having middle school compete against college or middle school compete against high school. They are only competing within their divisions. I'm not quite sure how to answer this one. Uh, The cadaver can be moved in any position if that helps. Essentially, think of it as a giant touchscreen that you can then use one finger to rotate in any position for the cadaver. The cadaver will just be looking like it's laying flat when you work with it on the table. Uh, yes. Thank you. If you do have a table and you need assistance, we do have a support team here that is very active. They work basically throughout the work week. They'll get back to you tomorrow. If you do send us an email tonight, they'll be happy to help you out if you do have any questions with your table and need some support. Is there any other ways to use the table in a school setting other than studying for tournaments? Absolutely. So the table is a very comprehensive anatomy and healthcare tool. Beyond just the cadavers, you have essentially all of these case studies. You have physiology components. Essentially, you can use it to study any part of anatomy and physiology, and that can be at any level. So, we're using it here for anatomy competitions primarily, but the table's used in research. It's used by private companies for medical device placement. There's a lot of different things that the table can do. That is a very long-winded answer I can give you, Prisha, but apologies for not getting too into it. And then what are the long form questions? Great question. It is these. So it's these types of questions where you might be asked the structure that detoxifies harmful substances in the blood. It might be which structure is also known as the windpipe. Essentially, it's asking you to identify a structure through a longer sentence. That's what these longer form questions are. Sure. And I guess that answers both of these. So all of these examples that I'm seeing showing on screen right now, these are all examples of what long form questions could potentially look like in the table. Where it could be identify the valve that separates the right atrium from the right ventricle, which that's the tricuspid valve. And so you need to click on that and submit it. Good question. So generally speaking, most of our tournaments are anatomy identification questions, which are just being asked these. So in a ratio, and it's not exactly this ratio for every tournament, but it's pretty close. It's about, in the prelim round, it's, I think, about 80% anatomy identification, 20% long form. And that's generally the case through most of our rounds. I would give it about 80-20 throughout, which means about for like the prelim, 20 would be anatomy identification, 5 would be long form. So there's way more quick anatomy identification than there is really long-winded questions where you have to think and stop before you kind of proceed from there. I hope that helps answer it. Right. Any other questions? Anything else we can help answer? If I didn't get to your question, I do apologize. I think where are we at? It's 5:55. We got one more. All right, for the virtual one in February, do we do it as a team or by yourself? It is always a team contest, so we do say 3 to 4 students per team. All right, but I think we're slowing down a little bit, and so I want to give a quick thank you to everyone that came here and joined us today. Thank you for sticking through the Q&A. Thank you for participating in this. And so, as well, we hope to see you in person at one of these different events. We're really looking forward to this year. We think it's really exciting. This new kind of question format has sparked a lot of interest in, advancing the types of anatomy and the way that you think about a particular structure. And so we're excited to be implementing that across every tournament that we're doing. But yeah, so thank you so much to everyone that joined. I think we're going to leave it here for today. And yeah, so if you do have any questions, as mentioned before, us here at Anatomage, we're happy to try to support you in whatever ways we can. If you do have questions for us directly, the events team, the tournaments team, reach out to us at tournaments@anatomage.com. And yeah, we'll be here to help answer. Other than that, I hope everyone here has a great night. And good luck with the school year so far. And we'll see everyone here in a couple of months.